So we're live. Yeah, that was fast.
Yeah, I try to place the mics so they're a little bit more prominent for folks so we can make sure we have. Well, I realized a couple times we can have sitting back here, it's got outside out of line.
She's down there, she's going for it. I mean, she's on Christy's computer and she logged off. And I can't find her, I logged it off. I turned the corner, because I turned the corner, and she's like, hey. Okay, we were back. Sure, sure. Hey, so, Andre was on the computer. So, better luck than ever. Yeah, so I just need to take roll.
So later.
And see, because it's.
I done moved up there.
So, it was him both calling to start. Because it's streaming and recording. So what you tell Andre to do? Get off?
Yeah, you tell me.
It's hard to cook them too.
It is. And places now kind of find that out with actually working on the second all the time. She don't never like what we eat anyway, so now it's good. Unless it has a little labor, take a jar with her. No, she ain't
Spring loaded?
The butt of the day?
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
got it loaded.
The king's throne.
I don't know how he got out and then got that show back.
He got it out and was turned.
Yeah.
You need to click it or something.
Gambling.
I bet you,
Yeah.
I bet you they could got a new drum set.
At least.
Well, that's right, right. You're on the input. Start about 5 o'clock and direct.
Oh.
All 4-foot concrete walls.
And in the middle of the night.
Trying to do this.
Oh, yeah. You know, we've got the train there, but it just runs different times on Saturday. Sometimes they don't hear it at all.
I have like
I hear the
seven,
train,
but
but
so I can just.
right here.
Never go
And that's when we got tires, you know, or the. Yeah, they. Train comes about 3:30 in the morning. Kind of get used to it.
You wouldn't think so, but it really is really.
Change with your waiting.
Well, like the one over there, one of our neighborhoods, you know.
Right.
I very rarely ever hear them blow the horn. Right. Even if they go across, I mean, they might blow it real quick, you know, for the mill traffic or whatever. It's just that little light, they fill those tanks up right there behind the substation. And so I hear that. I mean, the engine, you know, right. I hear that all the time.
Have questions or whatever, please feel free to come up one day.
I've been near the elementary school. That's gonna be a connecting line with Charles.
I think you said that they're putting one away.
Exactly. That thing's been there for 59, it's been there ever since I was a child. It's ever been redone.
I know that was about 16.
No, right here.
For the Harris
Oh,
here.
yeah,
I
well,
think
south.
that-
There's like one going across the Catawba, or the one that's on 74 is going to be replaced with that Lightning Bridge. Do all that at the same time.
Well, let's do that first, aren't they, before they start the interstate? Supposedly.
I think it's gonna end up being all at the same time. If I had a crystal ball,
Yep.
I heard somebody say, "Yeah, the traffic's gonna be bad," I'm like, really? Sorry, I mean, it can't be
Listen,
much
we're on the
worse.
news every morning.
Yes.
If nobody know anything else about Lord, they know exit 22, you gonna get stopped
Absolutely.
traffic.
absolutely. I was gonna say, Jim's is gonna just put an office right there on this.
That's what I'm gonna do.
Just gonna go ahead and park them there.
So when are they gonna start that?
Supposedly sometime this year.
Yeah, and then all the interstate widening's supposed to be going on, and then widening over here in front of Frank. So there's gonna be a lot of construction, there's gonna be several, Hope Road. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the whole,
It's all public.
the whole 74 Wilson Boulevard, that one line, right from Belmont
They can hear you.
down, well, no, from here.
I'm not exactly sure, because it's outside of our specific jurisdiction.
At least you
They're gonna do that bridge.
Yeah, that'd be the
Going
first
from
one.
74 into.
Yeah, just look, whatever Division 12 from NCDOT.
They're talking about moving Hamilton Road, the exit for that, they're gonna move it somewhere else. And, redo that whole 485.
Oh, they did,
Yeah,
yeah,
that-
that, I
It's
guess,
all
yeah.
gonna get, which thank
All right,
goodness.
are we good, Mr. Sheriff, as far as we know? So when the clock strikes 6, you're good to go, Mr. Chairman.
That's why I was hanging for it.
Second.
That's your daughter, and it's all.
I'll take the dog one, I'll do the dog side.
That dog's awesome. They go by her once.
Just remember, when you're ready, you can just go ahead and cut on your mic. We're good?
All right, well, let's call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum, and if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's go right into changes to an approval of the agenda.
Staff has no changes to the agenda as it's being presented.
Okay.
And if we could just have a motion to approve the agenda as it appears in your packet.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in
So-
favor? Unanimous.
So that was a motion by Norris and second by Heather.
And then we go to the minutes. If we could take a minute, review the minutes, and then if anybody would like to make a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And all in favor? It's unanimous. Do we have any old business? No old business? Okay. Moving on. New business. Joe?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this evening, I would like to kind of start a discussion with the board, and as I was explaining to our guest here from the Citizens Academies, one of the duties that the planning board performs or participates in is often kind of discussions about the ordinance and specifically the zoning ordinance. And so during City Council's last regular meeting in January, when they were kind of doing their round robin for I think it was for the comments that were made been during the agenda item itself. Councilman Robinson had expressed a desire for staff to maybe look at our sign regulations, basically stating that, at least in his observation, with the master sign permit, we've had a number of our very large businesses kind of come in, going through this master sign permit process, and said, hey, can we look at that specifically for our commercial and industrial uses, and kind of, is there a reason, or can there be adjustments made so that maybe they don't, always have to come through, or kind of just have us kind of look at some of these regulations. So if you remember, several months ago, this board, we did do a text amendment. It was kind of lumped in there with, when we were doing signage for, menu board, like digital menu boards, and then a part of that, we increased the wall sign for commercial zones and industrial zones. So it currently reads that those zones can have 100 or 10% of the wall area not to exceed 100 square feet, and it caps it off. So if they're going to go above that, then it would kick them over to the master sign process. And so kind of what I did in your application and in that email I had sent earlier with the copy of Article 17 is to kind of just open up the floor. I kind of put some starter questions in here and said, okay, well, what do we think would be a good direction to go in? What are things that we should consider? It appears to me that the council would like to make it, I'll say, easier for business, or at least wants to make the times that they have to go through that master sign plan maybe the exception rather than the norm of what it seems to be kind of going on. So we've had some pretty big businesses. We had the Newell Brands, which is that's 1.5 million, maybe 1 million plus square feet. So that's to me, that's kind of it's way over on the end. as far as from a size perspective, and we've had some other larger ones. And so to kind of kick off the conversation, I think one, we need to clarify our objective. So what are we trying to achieve here? Obviously, we have some direction from council that says, hey, try to make this a little bit easier. Didn't really say make it, maybe it's bigger, maybe there's something with the process, but just look at this process. He's made an observation that, hey, we've had 3 or 4 of these things, we've approved every one of them. Maybe something needs to change to the ordinance so that we don't have to we don't have to send businesses through this process, or at least not as often. So, that's kind of an idea that we can start with, but I wanted to kind of hear from you. Have you had any other observations or other things that you've seen maybe since this ordinance has been approved that you're like, you know what, maybe we should maybe add that to the list of things that we want to tackle as part of this review of the signed ordinance? So I'll kind of pause there and kind of see what your reaction to that is.
What's the biggest problem that we see that faces us where they're coming in?
Well, what's typically tripping them to go into, which is why we made the first one, was the sign. So initially, when the ordinance was first approved, it capped wall signs at 32 square feet, and you got one of them, right? When this board made a recommendation, council adopted a couple months ago, they can still only have one wall sign, but for commercial and industrial zones, it took that number from 32 to 100 just for businesses that were in those zoning districts, which is primarily stuff that's adjacent to 85, adjacent to 74, or Highway 7, which is more industrial in its nature. And it kind of limited that scope. So our other kind of mixed-use districts or other, like the downtown stuff, that all still stays the same. It only affects these bigger parcels, which are usually multi-acre properties, tens of thousands of square feet of building wall area. And so that's why we had initially made that first increase to 100. So to my knowledge, I think that's been the primary thing that people have been coming for, is wall signs. I think maybe before I got here, I want to say the Kia dealership or maybe the VW dealership may have had one.
Yeah,
But did that also include a freestanding sign along with that application?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, actually, the new one was smaller than the one they were replacing, which was kind of odd. And then
Yeah.
they wanted to put Kia and then service over by the service store. And the problem was they were only allowed the one, and we had to make an exception.
So I'm hearing maybe we should look at the number of wall signs that are allowed as a possible something we should look at. Do we think that we need to adjust the overall square foot? So again, right now, if they're 99 and below, it's just an administrative process, and we deal with it in the permitting office. Once it hits 100, and that's why this most recent one with the Chevrolet dealership, while it was true that the sign that was getting replaced is smaller, if you looked at the total package, right, they're still well over, they're into the hundreds of square feet if you add up all the different signs that they have. And so I was left with no choice but to usher them through the process, just as a matter of, if you looked at the total amount of signage that they have and what was being presented, it's still, I can't look at it just as one sign. There's no exemption in the nonconformity portion of that ordinance that says, well, if it's nonconforming and then they're putting something back that's smaller, then that's okay. We could look at that if that's something that you would think you would want to add, or maybe we could look at language that could make that process, if it's, if as long as whatever they're replacing is maybe less of a nonconformity, like if we're trying to go in the correct direction, but it's not quite there, I'd have to look at and kind of see how we want to do that. So you just gotta look at it and say, okay, do we want to try to get all the conformity all at once, or do we want to let it just be gradual to where eventually we could get it down to where it matches whatever the current ordinance is? And so that's kind of more of a kind of a policy and a mindset that we want to kind of take, and we can kind of take these ideas to council. We don't have to figure all this out tonight. I kind of wanted to kind of get some ideas from you guys, go through these questions, then we can potentially suggest some text amendments and then discuss those maybe at the next one. We might share some of these ideas with council and our report saying, hey, we did discuss it. We think this might be the direction. If they want to go ahead and weigh in and give us some additional direction, that would probably be welcome. So again, this isn't something that has to be done in one shot. I want us to really dig in, make sure we kind of are hearing folks and making sure we're addressing the issues. But again, yes, sir.
Are the signs that are up here at the restaurant, is that about the size that we?
Yeah, I mean, if you see a new sign up on there, then yeah, chances are we did approve that sign. So and I think it actually came in a little bit less than 32 square feet, right? So 32 is roughly an 4x8, right? But a lot of times with these downtown businesses, they don't have as much space between like a top of a window and here. So instead of it might only be 2 feet. So then it can be obviously much wider. It could be 16 feet long and 2 feet top to bottom. So it can look very different in different applications depending on what wall it's sitting on or how, but as long as the total square footage is meeting that requirement, then we'll allow it.
Have you had anybody complain that those signs are too small? Or that's not enough sign space to get on there what I want?
Not for anybody like downtown typically. Like you said, the ones that where it didn't work are the ones that you've seen and they came through and got it. So for most of the other businesses, one, either they've already had a sign, or for the new ones that were coming in, they made it work. So the way ours works is that you have X amount for like a sign that's going to be attached to the building. We call it a wall sign. You could also do a projecting sign. So if you didn't want it to be flat up against it, it could be 90 degrees and be. So a lot of times in downtowns you'll see that because they're wanting to catch the eye of the person walking down the sidewalk, not so much the car driving by, or it just sometimes it just works better. Then there's another subcategory that allows window signs. So a lot of obviously downtowns and other businesses, they want to use the window and they'll get a vinyl sticker or something. So there's a separate thing that goes in there. So it's just kind of all in how you want to break down this ordinance kind of makes a bunch of subcategories and then addresses them separately. So in theory, yeah, you could see multiple signs, but this one's directory, this one's window, this one's wall, and they have them broken out as such. So, we can kind of look at those, but I haven't, to date, I haven't had a whole lot of people that said, I can't, nobody knows what I do, or, but, we haven't had that many new buildings or new businesses come in to, I think, to really get it. They're really the only ones at the Miami Fusion that have done a new sign permit that I can think of in recent times.
Just for clarification, so the signage that's allowed, for instance, out here on the interstate Newell.
Mm-hmm.
So when we move from 32 square feet, 10% or 32 square feet to 100, right?
Yeah. So when Newell went through, it was 32, and then they wanted to put up 99, and they had to come through this process. Shortly after that's when we introduced the text amendment. So like if Newell came to us today and they had their 99, then I could do that administratively today.
Right,
so
right.
just for commercial industrial properties, and you'll see that in the section that I sent you, there is a little asterisk star next to the 32. So there's 1 star and then there's a 2 star, and then those are right there beneath the table.
And that's per building.
Yeah, so if you look at the disclaimer, it says per road frontage and this is and/or.
Right. So what I'm just getting at, Joe, is that we have already increased what the old regulation was
Right.
to a greater amount.
Yes.
It is per building, it's not a building. In other words, if they had 5 buildings, they could put one on each building within these guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, you guys or all of us, we've actually made it a little bit more user-friendly already.
We have. And so I think the idea would just be, is that adequate? Is it completing, or is that accomplishing the goal that you set off to do? So, and I'll kind of just hit on a couple of these points. So, we've kind of talked a little about setting a goal, trying to define what better sign visibility looks like, right? So, I think, how do we want to define visibility? Is it going to be square footage? Is it how much they can light it up? Is it going to be external lighting and ambient, internal? Right now we allow ambient, external, or internal lighting for
Right.
Wausau. So we've they're kind of allowed to have all that. Personally, I don't think that should change. It gives them options
Right.
on what they want to do.
I agree.
So, maybe make sure, do we want to just keep it with commercial industrial zones? Again, as far as our opinion, everybody that has come and applied has been in a commercial or industrial zone, have not had anybody in the mixed use zone, nobody in residential. So I think we're okay there. We got to look at, maybe how does it affect our businesses that are along the interstate and other highways? So, we have some businesses that they can kind of only be seen from the highway. They're not part of maybe our regular traffic pattern. So, some ordinances will take that into consideration. If you front on an interstate or a state highway, there may be a subsection that we can kind of go in and look at. And then, something else that we thought about doing, staff, is, we started collecting some ordinances from, Gastonia, Mount Holly, Belmont, other people that kind of have our same scenario, whether a state highway or the interstate runs through their jurisdiction. May not be a bad idea, there's no need to necessarily reinvent the wheel. We could be having conversation with those folks. Obviously, we want it to be what works for Lowell, right? And that may look completely different than what for everybody else, but we kind of, using this board and using council, well, what is that? What do we want to be? What do we want to look like, right? Do you want to be, very, very particular with your signage? Is there an image and a look or a style that we're going for? Is it going to look like the Vegas Strip and it's just right? And or some version of that in between. This ordinance seemed to, from my reading of it, and when it was initially passed, was very conservative and tried to keep everything fairly small, and then for these larger entities made the exception and going on, and kind of gave them a way to do that if they met that criteria. So I'll pause there and kind of pick your brains again about where, having read through the ordinance and that chapter, or just kind of being on the board for a little while, what areas do you think that we need to tackle?
May I ask, from my memory, like Norris was saying, the ones that we've had to approve, it was mainly based on size, but the last one was based on the number of signs allowed?
It was still size.
Okay.
Okay. And because when he sent in the package, if you looked at because what they're required to do when they send in a sign package is one sheet has basically the existing conditions. What do you have? Page 2 is what are you proposing? And so because in their calculation they were in like 300 or 400s or something like that. And it's just because of the business and stuff that they're in, a lot of times they just have more signs are needed, right? Because even though yes, it's a car dealership in this instance, there's a lot of other stuff that's going on. There's finance, there's service, there's all of these other little sub things that are going on, and they're trying to give information and show where that can be. So, that may be something else we need to take into consideration. So, some instances, some codes, they just put a total square footage, and you can kind of slice and dice it however you want to, as long as the total amount is not gone over.
And it sounds like it would make sense to me, if you're allowing, let's say the 100 square feet, if they want 3 signs, as long as it meets that criteria. If they go, an exception would be one of these buildings would say, well, if we did 3 signs, we're gonna need them a little bigger. So it comes out to 150, then that probably needs to be looked at again.
Yeah.
But my personal opinion would be that would streamline it. If a business knew they had this amount of square footage, they were allowed to, like you said, slice it and dice it any way they want to. We need a sign on each end and in the middle. Well, as long as it fits that criteria, do it.
Right. So that's one, something else I mentioned in some of the other jurisdictions I've worked in the past is they had some rules or, and tools for the department, which basically allowed more square footage if businesses were further back from the road. Right, so sometimes, and it could maybe, sometimes it's elevation, sometimes, you know, there's kind of unique circumstances, but so basically there would be a formula, and the further you were set back behind the minimum, so if the minimum's 30, but maybe you're at 130, then there was a formula and a way for you to increase the amount of signage, and you basically used that percentage, because you're recognizing, okay, yeah, you're further away, so yeah, even though this is a bigger sign, it's needed because of the distance that people are away from your building, just as a matter of where it was sitting, or maybe you bought a new business and you're kind of trying to deal with that. Might be something else we wanna look at. Yes, sir.
Is this ordinance just for exterior signs?
Yes.
Or is it interior and exterior?
No, we don't regulate what you have on the inside. So like grocery store or whatever, if you got a Starbucks on the inside, we don't regulate what's on the inside. Only what's on the outside of the building, and then what's on the, like freestanding sign. So whether it's your monument sign or what have you, we regulate those. Question? All right, so we've heard at least one recommendation is to look at maybe changing here in the table. So right now, so it's under maximum number, it says 1 per street or parking frontage per occupancy. So if a business has a sign on the front, but the parking lot's in the back, they can put one on the front and the back. Or if it's on the corner, it can have one on the front, the side, parking, what have you. So at least one recommendation is maybe to look at getting rid of that and just saying, hey, you know, moving more towards, hey, there's a total amount you get to play with, and then you divvy that up. We have some minimum requirements, meaning that like letters that you make couldn't be smaller than 6 inches, right? But most, I mean, they're way bigger than that, but that'd be more for like something downtown that they're not doing a very big sign, that would give them a minimum, and some other design criteria, but.
Would we would allow more square footage if the building was bigger?
If you want us to,
That's an idea.
if you think that is appropriate, then yeah. So I mean, and there's different ways to do that. Some places do sliding scales. Some people don't have a limiting, it'll just say 10% of the wall area or 8% or whatever percentage that they think is adequate for commercial and industrial properties. They might just stick a percentage on it, and then it's kind of just proportion to the building, and you don't have a limiting factor. Some places want limiting. Some, they might set it at 300 or 500 or whatever that town or municipality thinks is appropriate for their area, and again, it all goes back to, what do we want to look like? Do we want a set of limiting principles, or do we not? You know, do we want to set, 10% not to exceed like we have now, and just move that number? So that's kind of the ideas that we need to look at. Maybe you guys, looking at businesses that are in these corridors, looking at the maps, kind of figuring out what are we really dealing with, what situations, who's going to be affected, right? And we could kind of dive a little deeper into that. So that we can kind of make the appropriate recommendations.
Well, I can't help but think about, the dealership and the problems they've had with signage, where they wanted to
You talking about the motorcycle?
Yeah,
Okay.
where they want to put up a sign for each brand that they carry, and they're not able to do that because you need to be 3 acres of the property to be able to achieve what they're trying to achieve, and they're just a hair short of 3 acres, and there's all kinds of things that they're swirling around about, and I can't help but keep thinking about that, where.
Yeah. So the chairman's referring to section 17.10 under master sign plan, and under the submittal. Where are the qualifications? Oh, there it is. Under 17.10-2, under the application, the only properties that are eligible to apply, one are commercial, institutional, industrial, or mixed-use developments that containing 3 or more acres in area. And so that was, what he's referring to in that instance is that they were ineligible to apply because they did not have the acreage on their property to be eligible for
Do you
application.
remember the actual acreage? It's 2.9 something.
It's probably, yeah, within a half an
So
acre.
when you say ineligible to apply, that meant they could not even ask for,
Right, they didn't meet the minimum qualifications to even submit the application. Because there's a criteria, because it doesn't just open it up, the ordinance is specific into the areas, which kind of makes sense. Your commercial institutions, so like hospitals,
right,
big, those things, industrial or mixed use, which could be residential and a commercial building, maybe it's multi-story, maybe what, so the idea is like, these are big developments, big buildings,
yeah.
therefore that they would be the ones to qualify. And so you kind of, and so it threw in an area of 3 acres to try to,
Right.
that was probably taken from some, industry or national average of, okay, well, most of the projects that have these types of uses are usually at least this size.
Right.
But,
And that makes sense, but I think that we need to think about it, would it be reasonable to at least, allow for some kind of, allow somebody like that to at least apply for a variance consideration? I mean, if you're at 2.98 acres, my gut is nobody's gonna turn that down. They're gonna let the guys do it. If the signs are within line of the professional,
and so I don't think a variance would be the proper tool, only because variance are for hardships that you did not create.
right?
So I think if wanting to do that, if there is a standard, I think I would be inclined. I mean, somebody has the right to apply for a variance. You always have the right to apply. Now, whether or not it's for the board to say, hey, are you actually meeting the qualifications, or should we even hear it? So on, they can ultimately make that decision.
Right.
I would argue that it may be better placed in a text amendment, just because you're wanting to, what you're fundamentally wanting is you're wanting to move the needle and allow that. So, I guess I could probably argue it,
Both sides.
argue it both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd just be.
Well,
one of
I'm
those.
just, I know we got the business there, it's there now.
Right. And-
But I'm just thinking, well, I don't think if it was a deal breaker, whether a large business like that was going to move to the area, I think 2/10 of an acre, I would probably say, yeah, you can go ahead and put that sign up, but like you said, I can
Yeah,
understand.
and as long
I
as
can
we
understand.
make text amendment changes or give flexibility in a way that either the administrator has, so some ordinance says, we'll even give the administrator, it says, okay, you can vary it, but only by this much, to allow for some of it that's just close enough. So some of it may say like 10%, or, one of the ordinances I worked with for setbacks said that the administrator could vary the setback 10%, but no more than 1 foot, whichever was less, right? So if the setback is 10 feet, they could only get to like 9.5 or whatever. Then in theory, I could grant that, and it could go on and be an administrative process. So there's tools we can put in the toolbox. We just kind of have to decide where we want that line to be, who we want to give the permission to do it. Do you want me to handle it as the administrator? Do you want to set up some other rules? And I don't know if there is one right. It kind of is just, how does the town want to have to deal with this? Is it just, hey, just go ahead and get it done and move it through? Then maybe we want to lean more on, hey, let's just change the ordinance so it's kind of by right and we can just move on as a processing the permit. Or do we want to set some limitation? We just got to figure out where that is.
Yeah, I just always thought that was kind of in a bad spot to where they couldn't really, because they're just a little short and they weren't able to really get to where it was. There was a path, but it wasn't very easy, and
Sorry, I left mine down
but-
there. So I was gonna.
but I think their goal was just to put, now they handle multiple brands, and they wanted to put a sign for each brand out in front and facing the interstate, so everybody knows, hey, we handle all this stuff. And it seemed like it wouldn't be that bad of an idea. It doesn't seem like it wouldn't be consistent with everywhere else. So it just seemed like it was, there's a little issue there that maybe we could.
Okay. All right, any kind of other, so right now I've got, we'll review the kind of master sign, kind of qualifications. We'll look at kind of nonconformity, so basically what the ordinance says now, this is under 17.13, so a permanent sign which does not comply with one or more of the requirements of this article shall be grandfathered until such sign is removed. That's what got them, because that sign came off, it's a completely new sign, so that's the trigger, right? Physically altered beyond maintenance, relocated, damaged, so even if they took that sign and moved it 10 feet down, it was physically removed and moved down, and basically says, after which shall be brought into compliance with all requirements of this article. So that's why my hands were kind of tied, even if I thought it was a great idea or not. It didn't give me the right to make that decision administratively, and kind of told me exactly how I was going to do it. So there, maybe there's exceptions or some things, massaging that can kind of be in there if you think that that's an important attribute to add, and said, okay, well, maybe you could add a clause in there as well, if the total overall is going in this direction, maybe we'll allow it administratively, and then if any of these other things. So we got that, 17, 13. So we've talked about overall wall sign areas. Do you guys have a number in mind, or is it you just want to work off of percentages and not have a limiting factor?
I like Norris's idea. I like to just, based on square footage, do with it what you want.
But do you want, so right now, again, I'll read it, it says, so for commercial and industrial zones, it says 10% of the wall area not to exceed 100 square feet is what you currently have right now. So, I guess what we're asking is, do you want to change the percentage or change the total amount of square? Do you want to limit it at all, or do you just want to take that part off and leave it where it just says 10% of the wall area?
Yeah, my question, so up to this point, again, we've increased it from the 32 to 100.
For commercial and industrial
Okay.
only.
So, and are we still talking about commercial industrial only?
I was going to leave that,
Okay.
that
so-
right now, that's the sandbox that you're playing in. That's the only categories that got the increase to 100, the cap of 100.
So all the businesses, say downtown,
Are not included.
they're still the one per
One
space.
per and 32 square feet.
Okay.
Don't need a huge sign downtown.
No.
per
Yeah.
se. I mean, I think that's pretty adequate right now.
Yeah.
So what would at this point, let's say, brand new businesses, 5 brand new businesses come into town. Some down here, some on a block down, west, some on a block toward Gastonia. All of them's gonna have to make some kind of application to show what they were planning to do. What process do you know right now that could make that easier, could streamline the process, make it more user-friendly? Because you're the one that deals with it.
Right, and so, I mean, right now, again, they come through, and if you kind of look inside the chart, so there's an allowance for wall projecting, or what they call a blade type sign. Then you get an allowance for window signs, for directional signs, for outdoor directory. So think like a campus style, like Franklin Square, right?
Yeah,
You pull
yeah.
in and there's a
Right.
directory,
Right, right.
So that's separate. You get stuff for your awnings. So it kind of slices and dices it. Like I said, I think right now, or what seems to be the crux of the matter, is just big square footage buildings that even, like you said, even you can go by Newell Brands. Again, it's 1.5 million square. I can't even. I mean, it's
Right.
hundreds
Oh,
and hundreds
God,
of
yeah.
feet long by 50 feet tall. So even so, 100 square feet or 99.99, which is what they put in, is still small. Now they were fine with it. They didn't try to push for more, and I think the different businesses and that brand are going to have different ideas of how big and how much. You know, your big retailers may have a different idea of how big their sign needs to be versus somebody that does, distribution, where it's not really customer driven, driving up, where is that thing? Oh yeah, there it is. Go and pull in. So I think that does maybe play a little bit into it, but I'm just kind of guessing here from what council said. It seems like for these big businesses, they feel like that this should just be something administrative, so something to happen to where they can get the size and the square footage that they need and not have to go through a public hearing and pay the money and go through all of that stuff. It seemed like they had an inclination that should be just more procedural, fill out the application, do the permit. I think it's just an idea of, well, how big is that? And I think that's where staff is looking for a direction, between the planning board and the council. If you just let them have 10% down here, again, we'll go back to Newell Brands, that could have been a pretty big, it still only would have been 10% of that wall area, but that could have been 1,000 square feet. Right? It could have been 20 by, however long.
Well,
So,
would it be user-friendly as well as streamline the process if we worked off of what we have, the, 10% not to exceed 100 square feet, but give administration the okay to approve up to a certain amount of,
yeah, so you could change that
adjustment.
number, and if you wanted to be 300 or 500 or whatever cap you want to pull, if you want to put a cap on it at all. Like I said, I don't think right now. I mean, again, it's just understanding where we think we need to land with that. I mean, if you just say 10%, then that's fairly easy as far as I'm concerned. But again, it's knowing what do we want the town to look. What is the end result of that?
right.
And as long as everybody understands what that could be, and you're okay with that, then we could go in that direction. Just know that as the buildings get bigger, then their
Sign's
available
gonna-
signage
yeah,
could
sure.
but it's still proportional. It's still only 10% of that wall area. So it's just, yeah, I don't know if there's one, right? And it may be something we tried out and like, no, that wasn't it. And then we amend, and it's not like we can't come back at a later time, but it might be trial.
And to this, at least to date, we've not had anybody come back wanting more than 100, right?
Not to date, no. And
Yeah.
that's why we had changed it to
Yeah, so
100, because at
we've
the
not-
point
we've
in
not-
time,
we've
that
not
was the
seen a
largest.
problem. We've
That
not
was the
seen a
largest
problem.
number that we had to date.
Right.
Until we got the latest one, which again, that was really more of an overall number.
Right.
And so we kind of found like, oh, yeah, we fixed that, but it didn't necessarily account for this
Yeah.
situation.
Well, again, we're not resolving it tonight, you said, but I think we've already made a move on that by moving it to 100. We need to see where that goes before we start trying to adjust it, and we don't even know if it's gonna be sufficient or a problem. I mean, somebody else has
No, I
something
agree
right
with
there.
that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think we made that, move to give the industrial, commercial. I don't think we're gonna see an industrial right here downtown, so it's gonna probably be more towards the interstate, maybe up 74 or 7 here. I agree. I guess my thing is I'm like, I have to see things to kind of understand things sometimes. So, Mr. Robinson bringing that up, I mean, what brought that to the attention?
Yeah,
I mean,
well, and
if you're not getting these applications.
So I think the comment came after, because they had to set the public hearing for this master sign permit for Chevrolet, and that was like he brought that comment up during that time.
Okay.
So I think that's what, he's like, well, cause he,
Why-
you know, he's like, well, why are we doing this? What brought this on?
Okay.
Kinda asking the same, he said, it's going down, and why are we doing this? And I said, well, the way the ordinance is written, it didn't give me flexibility as the administrator to just pass it like you're saying. I said, ultimately, the business itself still has a very, a lot of sign, you know, it was in the 300 or 400s if you added every one up. So technically, their sign package and the way their dealership is what we call, it's a legal non-conforming is the official term. That basically, at the time that the dealership went in originally, and when they originally got their signs, they were legal at that time. Obviously, ordinances have changed, things have changed, and so you were code compliant at the time you were approved. Now you're making changes, and that's where the rub comes in.
So, using that example, what could we do with the language to make that an administrative change rather than having to go through all that process?
Yeah, so I mean, you have a nonconformity section, that's 17.13
Right.
in this ordinance. So, you know, we could start there, if you'd like, and we could maybe look at language to adjust that. So, you know, if you want staff to be able to look at the situations, okay, it's going in the right direction towards conformity. And if you want to make that an exception to the rule to allow us to do that, then yeah, you could present that as an option. I think maybe from what I'm hearing from you, and then maybe tweaking who's eligible. So, you know, it's
Yeah,
seems like one
I
or two
think
things,
changing signs out and upfitting signs, we shouldn't have to complicate that. You guys should be able to do that.
So if it's a direct replacement, like for like, it's not getting any bigger.
Yep.
Maybe we should just say that that's okay.
That's what I think.
Because we're not increasing the nonconformity.
Right.
Additionally, if we're having nonconformity and we're actually making it smaller, that would be okay too.
Mhm.
Yes.
That's what I think.
Yep.
And then, Mr. Chairman, I think you said you'd maybe just like to look at that 3 acres. So what would you think, like, just move it down to 2.5, or maybe a percentage of, you know, basically, or, you know, we could go back and, you know, do another clause if you want to say, you know, staff would have the ability to give a percentage of wiggle room, so you could leave it at 3, you know, if it's within a percentage, or would you just want to move it to
I think-
2.5 or 2.25?
I think I would like to take it, cause I'm thinking, I don't know about you guys, but if you're sitting on 2 acres, I mean, versus 3 acres, there's not a whole lot of difference, I don't believe. And, but I think there should be, either, yeah, change the number or give you a very large margin on that to, cause what bothers me with all that is they miss it by just a little tiny bit, and so it kinda locks them out, and, I don't think that should be happening. I think that you should be able to make an exception for them, so maybe the percentage might be better.
Percentage and then maybe a number of
What are
nonsense.
you talking about, like 10%?
Uh-huh.
I would even say like 25, 30%. Give
But I
them,
think if you're gonna do, I would caution, cause if we're gonna do that, then I think we might as well.
just roll it back to like 2.5 or 2.
Right, because, you know, at that point, that would be 25. Am I doing that math right? If it's 3 acres,
2.5.
33.
Yeah.
If you go back to 2, it's a third of it.
it's a third of it, so 33%. And that, but basically that says, hey, the standard's 3, but if you're 2, that's all right too, then I would say just make it,
Just make it 2, yeah.
and then you don't have to worry about, but then you might be
Then
back
you're
in
gonna
the
have
same.
a 2 acre guy come up that's got 1.98,
That's
we're gonna have
it.
the
Yeah.
same problem. So
So-
I think we need to stay with the higher number and just give you or administration the opportunity to say, we can, give a variance or whatever you wanna call that.
Yeah, I
A
think.
non-conformity.
There's always somebody gonna fall right there on the
Exactly.
guideline.
Well, and I think we just gotta, y'all would need to decide along with council, like where we're gonna draw the line in the sand. And
Right.
say, look, we have to set a limiting principle, and sorry, this is just what
Right.
it is. And you gotta think, the idea, and I think the logic behind it in choosing 3 acres is typically, it was trying to address big projects, right?
Right.
So people that have a lot of parking area, big buildings, those sort of things, which most of your grocery stores, and maybe you can fill in a little bit, they're gonna probably be all bigger than 2 acres. Any of your medical buildings typically are gonna be hitting that threshold very, very close, unless it's just a very small, medical office that doesn't have that many spaces. But I can't think of anything offhand, and, maybe we can help, with some GIS too, maybe look at the size of our parcels that are in these districts, this so you can kind of maybe have an idea of like, what is the acreage? That might be the only real close except, I haven't done the analysis, I don't really know off the top of my head, but,
I think
it might help you.
I
It
think
might help you in.
the only issue that's come forth, I think.
Yeah.
But I just would like to see that change, and there's different ways to do it. I don't know exactly what y'all would want to do, but,
We can look at it and give you.
I like the idea of giving Joe the flexibility
Oh, absolutely.
and just letting him take care of things like that, making it easier
With
for
that
you.
close of a,
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, we just figure out what the percentage is and kind of give you an idea of how many acres that would be, and then maybe we can do that, give you an option, A, B, C, or D, if it was this or this, based on that 3 acres, here's about how much we would be,
I mean, like you said, most of these properties are within 3 acres anyway. Why is there even, there's not that many of them, why do we have a minimum anyway? I don't think you'd be inundated, because it's not giving them the ability to just change their signs, it's giving them the ability to apply.
Yeah, so it's not
So why
guaranteed.
is there
Right.
even, why can't that just be administrative discretion instead of a minimum?
So just take it, so as long as they were one of those categories, just let them
Yeah.
apply,
at least,
Yeah.
yeah.
and then let the board figure it out. But we could do
Yeah.
that, we'll show that as an option, and then maybe I'll show and then maybe we can circle back around next month. Okay. Thank you. Any other categories or anything you guys saw while kind of reading through that code section that you think we would need to address? At least from the memo here, I had thrown some stuff in there just when you're dealing with larger signs, just some of the things to be thinking about. It's not, again, they're just kind of idea points, kind of traffic concerns, those sort of things that may happen if you have larger signs. And a lot of it's about, well, where is it, how close is it, where is it located, all of those things. I think it's kind of one of those things, like, you know it when you see it and you're like, oh yeah, that's way too much, or it's way too bright, or it's distracting to the point that I'm not focusing on the road. We just had to figure out what that is and then put it into ordinance language that makes sense.
I think a visual, like, I can't remember who said it, seeing this visually, like Newell's sign, what if, like, just a visual of what their sign would have looked at if it looked like if they had used the 10% rule and weren't limited to 100 square feet of signage, like, what would it look like on the side of that building?
And I can try, I'm not the best artiste, or have some of that software, but I might be able to maybe pull some other examples, or, maybe talk to some different
And they
sign
could have put all
companies.
their brands on the building too, that's what you 'cause
Yeah, and
Newell
they
owns a
very
bunch of
well
brands.
may want, if something changed, they might come back and be like, oh, well, now that this is an option, they didn't ask for it because, because they read through, their sign contractors read through, and they're like, well, look, guys, you can't apply for it, it's not even an option, so don't worry about it at this time. So if they want to do that, then the board and the council just have to decide, is that the look that we want? Does that make sense for that area or that zone or that type of business? And if so, then we just need to make sure our code reflects that so that we get the desired look and outcome that everybody wants. So, I don't have really any other points in the stuff that I made on here, and I've taken down some directions, so,
Anybody else have anything else? If you're done, Joe?
I'm done, and I'll just say in the email that once we adjourn, then I did set up a little bit of time for our Citizens Academy if they want to ask some questions or have some stuff that came up during the meeting, like a Q&A session. So.
The planning report, did you want to touch on it?
Sure, I can do that. so like I said, we're kind of off to a good start. Already have done 10 zoning permits. Those were mostly, I think, new home development, a handful of some zoning verification letters, those sort of things for different properties. That's most of the time that's realtors working with, a buyer or seller trying to just get something from the city saying, hey, it's zoned this, you can do this, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, we did the 10 in January. Total for the year, we're at 15. Trying to think of some other big things. Oh, we're essentially finished up the preliminary plat review for Spencer Ridge, which is the big development, was it 406 north of Poston Park. So we're expecting, they're currently working on their construction drawings, and we would probably expect those in mid-spring, March, beginning of April. So that'll definitely, those are typically multi-month processes, because that's obviously, it's a big development, and this is the full engineering. So this is when you get into the very nitty-gritty. How does the water flow? How's this? All of those things. And so we'll be working on that for the next several months. And we're probably hopefully going to be finishing up with the Willow Creek Meadows, which is Grove Street next to Choice Beverage. So they are kind of towards the end of their construction review. There's still a handful of things that we're going to have to get signed off on before we can officially kind of cut them loose, and then it's kind of up to them on timing. How quickly can they mobilize? They have to get a handful of other things in place before you would probably see anybody actually moving any dirt. But those are kind of the two closest, I say, for construction. River Heights is still kind of going along at their pace. They started on the single family side, so at least all the permits have been issued for the townhome side. That doesn't mean they're all under construction, but they've gone through the zoning process, and I believe that they've mostly applied for building permits from the county. So at least all the permits, all that stuff has kind of been done, and then they're just now getting started on the single family. So they're going to start with the model home, and then they'll probably just kind of wait and see how the market and everything else is going, and then that'll kind of somewhat determine the speed at which they complete the other ones.
Have you, when does the study start for the amount of cars and the road and all that? When do we have to do something there?
So DOT does it. So every development, because almost every development that we have currently going on, those entrances are off of DOT maintained roads. So DOT, for those in the room, North Carolina Department of Transportation, they do a study, and they call it a traffic impact analysis, or you hear the term TIA often used. And so they have a mathematical formula. So every development, every subdivision that we get, when we start off, DOT gets a copy, and then they're the ones that determine if the number of units, if the math kicks it into needing a requirement, and then they're the ones that are requiring the developer to do that. So Lowell does not do the analysis, our engineers don't do it, because at least all the ones that we have going on right now, all their entrances are off of DOT roads, so it wouldn't be any need for us to do one, because they have jurisdiction. And they're the ones that say, oh, you need to do a turning lane, you need to do this, you need to, whatever the formula spits out, that's what they have to do.
Those studies are in the process now,
Those,
correct?
yeah, so whenever these were done, so DOT is the holder of making sure that they've,
And
that they've done that.
if I remember right, in most cases, DOT requires the builders to foot the bill for that, right?
Right, so
The state don't
typically,
do it. They
what,
require them to do
For
it.
like the turn lane?
No,
or-
the
or-
study.
The
well,
study.
yeah,
Oh, I got
so
you.
whatever the not all mitigations,
Right.
they don't always end up in a signal or always end up in a
Right.
turn lane. It's all based on the daily average
Mhm.
trips typically, and so there's a formula that says number of houses, the area, and they have like all the peak dates, and they get traffic counts from everything. They look at other developments that are going on. But again, the developer is typically only required to mitigate the increase. So, you could take a street that's already overburdened. It's not the developer's job to fix the entire. They're only responsible for potentially mitigating what they are adding to. All right, so we can't make a developer go and install like two sets of signals at other intersections and say, oh, well, that's tied, that's not how it works. But yeah, so for all of the, at least all the ones that we currently have, and typically those are done during the rezonings. And so that stuff would be handled way ahead of time, and then typically would be made like as part of a condition, whatever that the TIA yielded as a result, it would have been tied in as a condition.
So we're looking at 20 years before anything changes.
So I'll say typically with traffic, it's typically not proactive when it comes to the Department of Transportation. Most of when you get dollars or you get change is typically and the formulas have a lot more to do with accidents, fatalities, those sort of things. That's currently right now, it's just this is how the formula works. And so kind of the squeaky wheel gets the grease idea from what I understand. So yeah, at least on those roads. So
Has Lowry Lane, is it doing anything? What have we heard?
I haven't heard anything since we reviewed the initial preliminary plan.
Because, yeah, it just seems like it's not going real fast. So,
Yeah, it's been kind of quiet.
y'all know Lowry Lane?
Unless does anybody else have any questions about what was on the monthly report? No further comments, Mr. Chairman.
Cool. Anybody else have anything?
Thank you, Joe.
Make a
Well, I
motion
guess
to
that-
adjourn.
There we go. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous.
Cheryl?